When I was 4, I lost my father in an accidental explosion. In an instant, my entire world was flipped upside down. You see, at that age, you don't just lose a parent, you lose certainty, security, and the person who's supposed to help you make sense of the world and even give you direction. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Consequentially, I was raised in a house with 3 older sisters and a single mom, so naturally, I'm a real man's man. The truth be told, though, as a kid, I was pretty lost, and I was searching for answers. And I didn't find those answers in textbooks, but rather through teachers who saw me and reminded me that there's more to learning than just tests. There's also loving to learn and finding your purpose. And that really is in line with the theme that I'd like to share with you here today. In fact, I posit that the entire purpose for K through 12 public schools is simply to create lifelong learners. And the only way that we can sustainably do that is by focusing on purpose-driven education. Now, before we move on, we need to discuss one more thing, and that's the purpose of a child. I describe that best as a child's purpose is the best of what they're equipped with right now to help others solve problems. Now, it's only natural in academia that some of you might be sizing me up right now wondering, does this guy even have a PhD in education? My answer, no, I don't, but I did wear all black today to look slimmer on camera, so there's that. But here's what's really worth focusing on. You know, today our school system has so many competing priorities that it really stifles what matters in education. And in the process, we're not just failing students, we're driving away lifelong educators. We have a pipeline problem. So the question is, how do we get here? And more importantly, what are we going to do to fix this? Growing up as the youngest, I learned 2 universal truths really quickly. Number 1, my opinion did not matter. And 2, if I wanted to use the bathroom in the morning, well, I'd have to wait my turn. So what did I do? While I waited, I did what any 90s kid would do. I watched Boy Meets World. And, at the time, I really thought that I was just killing time. But as it turns out, I was actually getting an education, just not the kind that you find in a textbook. Because if you've ever watched Boy Meets World, then you know about Mr. Feeney, right? He wasn't just a teacher. He was a mentor, a wise counselor, the kind of educator that made you think beyond the classroom. And that really is what we hope for in our teachers today: wisdom, intention, and purpose. The problem is that our education system today, our schools, promote such a flawed definition of purpose. And furthermore, we can't even agree, until today, on what the point of school is in the first place. After 3 years of interviewing superintendents, teachers, and even workforce directors, I came to a truly shocking conclusion. Adults agree on absolutely nothing. It's true. School choice debated, the Oxford comma controversial somehow, and jeans in the workplace, don't even get me started. I would have wore those if I had the chance. Today, our schools are failing to teach purpose, but there is something that we've collectively all bought into. And I'm talking about these cliches on purpose that sound really good and inspiring, but actually lead students to feeling really frustrated. Things like college is where you find your purpose, or your job is your purpose, or my favorite, follow your passion and your purpose will follow. But the reality is purpose isn't something that you can declare in a major. It's found through lived experience. And your job is just what you do. It's not who you are in entirety. At least it shouldn't be. And let's not forget that passion, while good, it's really a fleeting feeling, while purpose is more like a compass. It points you due north. And yet, schools aren't failing to teach purpose just because of some bad advice. No. The real problem, the 2 big culprits, standardization and time. In interviewing more than 200 people, participants were asked, what's the number one problem facing public schools right now? They actually all said the same thing. They said, there's just not enough time. And it's true. But of course, we educators, we take pride in our multitasking, right? We wear it like a badge of honor, and we pull up our bootstraps and we say, I've got this. We grade papers in the pickup line, answering emails and writing lesson plans with one hand while rocking our own kids to sleep with the other hand. And still, everything doesn't get done. The average teacher on any typical workday throughout the U.S. before school has attended IEP meetings. They've answered emails. They've printed handouts praying that the copier doesn't jam. By the way, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, at least I don't think. And they've also checked on a crying student in the hallway. By the time lunch rolls around, if you even get a lunch, then you're answering emails again, breaking up arguments, tracking down missing assignments, and squeezing in bites of, let's call it, microwavable mac and cheese, And then, finally, you get to pee. But, here's the ugly truth that no one talks about with this time issue, that multitasking is a myth. It doesn't exist. In fact, it's highly inefficient because what we're actually asking teachers to do is a thing called task switching. And even the AI that some want to replace teachers with can't multitask. So let's not blame teachers for adapting like this. Again, competing priorities. It's a really interesting thing because I equate it to having like our very own Michael Scott, right? Where you label everything urgent A, urgent B, urgent C, and urgent D, right? The funny thing is that when you try to make everything urgent, nothing actually is. And if you try to make everything equal, well, the problem there is that it leads to teacher burnout. We know this. There's this old saying that if you chase two rabbits, well, you'll catch neither one. And the reality is that with our teachers today, we ask them to chase an entire field every single day. It's a moving target. I mean, we've built an education system obsessed with efficiency, and we're not even good at it. I'm talking about, teaching to the test, trying to fit students into neat little boxes, measuring success in letter grades. And here's the thing, though. Life isn't standardized, and neither is purpose. And that's the real disconnect here, because families, their idea of success and thriving looks vastly different than what schools are currently aiming for. Families want their kids to be adaptable, resilient, and fulfilled, right? They actually want their kids in public schools if it can meet that criteria and that promise. Which leads me to my next finding, is that, we shouldn't judge schools by who rises to the top. In fact, we should judge them by who's left behind. And standardization is leaving way too many children behind as we track them over time. In interviewing for my children's book, I got the chance to talk with dozens of experts on the topic of autism. And one common phrase kept coming up. They said, Nick, if you've met one child with autism, well, guess what? You've met one child with autism. And yet, we continue to push a one-size-fits-all approach to education, one that focuses on a narrow set of skills versus life skills and soft skills and the things that actually translate to students navigating the real world, right? But let's be clear. We're not just failing the most vulnerable students. In fact, we're actually conditioning all students with the idea of becoming a future worker rather than lifelong learners. I mean, in fact, I would go so far as to say that as adults, we've bought into the idea that the sole purpose of school is to prepare for jobs. And that's a disservice to everyone involved, including our workforce. It's no wonder that the majority of college graduates, when asked, actually said that they would go back and change their major if they could, right? If schools are supposed to be the place where students thrive and figure out their purpose and become lifelong learners, then why does it feel for so many like they're being pushed through a system and it's more like a dropout factory rather than a purpose factory? But what if we did shift our perspective, right? What if we did find a way to do this? What if we gave students the time and space that they needed to use their compass and to find a way to help others specifically? And more importantly, we gave teachers the space to find their guidance, their fulfillment through helping students through that. Well, there's a great example that is actually strengths-based. It pulls on the best of not just what you don't have, but rather what you do have. And there's no better example of this than Temple Grandin. At 2 years old, Temple was diagnosed with autism. And most experts at the time said that, she would not live a meaningful, independent life. Her parents, being great parents, of course, they said, absolutely not. In fact, they reached out to her teachers, her schools, and they became advocates for her, ensuring that she got the time, the space, the opportunities that she needed to thrive. And then something really pivotal happened. She met her science teacher in high school. And this man saw the potential in her. He saw her as more than just her diagnosis, right? He saw a purpose lingering to be drawn out. And he gave her that time and that intention. And he gave her those opportunities. And because of that, she actually went on to become and is a advocate for livestock. And as a matter of fact, she revolutionized the way that animals are treated across the world. It's an interesting thing, too, because, we talk about, how did we actually get here with her? Well, the reality is that that teacher gave her all those things that we've been talking about. And the most interesting part about her story is that when asked if there were a cure for autism, would she take it? Her answer, no, she wouldn't. Because she sees the way that her mind thinks, the way that she operates is more than just a diagnosis. In fact, it's what led her to have such a purposeful impact. So sure, she found a job, but the reality is that she actually found her purpose. And I think about what would happen if we gave every student that opportunity, that time, that intention, and there is a way. There is. And unfortunately, we have no other choice but then to focus on this, because the opportunity lies at our feet. And by doing this, we're going to have students who are like Temple. I mean, just imagine how many more Temple Grandins would we have if we focused on purpose like this in the classroom, purpose-driven education. Now, there is a way. There's 3 things that we can actually do today, right? This week, this month, this year. As a matter of fact, when we walk out of here, that I believe will actually lead to purpose-driven education. And we don't have to wait on more funds or legislation. And we certainly don't have to sit in our seats, in an echo chamber of all the problems that are facing education. So I won't be coy and I won't be cheeky. I'm just going to tell you like it is, the 3 things that I know we can do now. 1, we have to invest in our teachers. We also have to start asking better questions. And we need to reinstate teachers as role models. Now, here's what I mean. When I talk about investing in our teachers, what I mean is focusing on personal development rather than just professional development. All my teachers know what I'm talking about. But you'd be surprised to know, as I was when I left school as a former teacher, that there are plenty of private institutions and even public ones that allocate funds for their employees. So their employees can go out and find an art class, a coaching program, something that is fulfilling, that's going to further their learning, but it's not even directly tied to their work. Think about that. We are the industry known for learning, so why not invest back in our teachers in that way? And it doesn't have to be tied to a credit. And think about the example that sets for our students. Second, when I say, when I say that we should ask better questions, here's what I really mean. You know, instead of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up, or rather, who do you want to be? Those have served a purpose at one point. Instead, we should start asking the question is, what problems do you want to help others solve? I asked my 6-year-old that question recently on a car drive, and what he said opened my eyes forever. He said, Dad, I'd like to help parents find their kids. And I thought, wow, think about the power there, because think about the jobs that lie within that purpose. He could be a social worker. He could be a police detective. He could, let's say, be the director of an adoption agency. And the possibilities were endless. I'll never see it the same. And this applies for teachers and parents to be asking students. Now, my admin, I didn't forget about you. Administrators should be asking this to their teachers as well, because the reality is, teachers, they're bought in. They chose this as a profession. And the thing is that we need to make sure that we are giving them the time to ask these questions and also contribute. The last thing is we importantly also need to reinstate teachers as role models, and that just means that we need to give teachers the chance to explore their ambitions and their dreams before they leave the classroom. That's really it. Now, growing up, sure, I had Mr. Feeney, right? And his impact was real. That's the reality. He wasn't just a teacher. And, you know, the reality is every student needs a Mr. Feeney or a Miss Tu or a Miss Durham. And we cannot move forward without lifelong educators. If we really want students to thrive, then first we need to build schools where teachers and students are able to tap into their purpose and focus on purpose-driven education rather than just tests. Thank you.